We know you're going to love this because cooking shows are so popular in Britain. But we begin with a question asked famously some time ago of Stefano, who knows more about these things than perhaps any of us. Stefano, what does computer science yet have to learn from APL? There's two parts to his famous answer. The first part was nothing. The lessons have been absorbed long ago. Hell, this is the 50th anniversary. But it's the best language for a programmer who wants to make $1 million through programming. And there's many examples of this where people with particular skills have used Dyalog, APL generally, to write an application which has made them rich. And these applications make financial plans, they evaluate mortgage portfolios, mature pension policies, estimate pension fund liabilities, match DNA, these are only a fraction of them, and they enrich their authors. But how do we get from someone with particular domain knowledge and access to a computer to here, to a plutocrat? And the path is now fairly well marked out. The first part of it is you acquire an analytical skill. And generally in our business, it's something to do with numbers. And you write programs that will help you with that. And there's a lovely looking program. I don't know if you can read bits of it. Report P, account balances less than $2. The great thing, as we know, about writing these programs in APL is that we can read them. So we have a happy path from taking our analytical skill, writing tools that help ourselves. Then there's a third step. It's packaging them for other people to use, turning them into slick, techie programs and applications. And the last bit is you license them to your competitors. And now you're in the business of making money through selling and supporting software rather than applying the analytical skill that you started with. As I said, this is now a well-trodden path, and many of us here work on applications that started in exactly this way, as Morton says, in a garage somewhere. Actually, Morton calls it a garage, and in some cases it was a garage. So here's our 4-step program again, and the bit outlined in red, the third, is what we're here to talk about. As when you get your copy of Dyalog and you dig into the tutorial materials, there's lots there to show you how to write the programs, how to use the language, how to use the tools. But there's almost nothing in there about how to package up an application and to ship and sell it to other people. So the step we're trying to take is from my lovely code over here that works for me to some slick, techie application. And the answer we propose to this is the Dyalog Cookbook. What goes in this pot? Well, it turns out quite a lot. When we started looking at all the things we needed to do, we have to decide how the workspace is going to be structured. We need to discuss how the software is to be shipped as a standalone exe, as a DLL for other programs to be used. And there's lots of extra work for the program to do, which we don't need it to do for ourselves, logging events, handling errors, handling configuration settings, and so on. So we wound up with quite a big agenda of things to put in the book. And we know these don't interest you guys very much. And the reason for that is that most of us coming to this conference are working in environments and on applications where these problems, these issues were settled long ago. But for new people coming into this world, as you see, is increasingly happen. They come expecting, as Morten's been saying, to see shared code in text form up on GitHub, you can use, and to find some kind of framework for how to put it all together. And the Dyalog Cookbook is a project to create that book, or in book form, the guidelines for how to do that with the current tools. And we've seen as a result of the relentless innovation at Dyalog over the last 10 or 15 years, how the tools have changed underneath us. So many of the ways that I and you are familiar with solving these problems, how to manage source code, are solutions that have been working well for 10 years, 20 years, perhaps longer. There are now new tools around. While we may not be using them, the guidelines need to be there for how to use them to put together an application. Much of what goes in the pot has come from the APL Wiki. Would you just raise your hands briefly if you've ever visited the APL Wiki? Okay. The APL the APL Wiki was heroically implemented and is lovingly maintained by my colleague Kai. Yeah. So you must be glad to see that it's been visited. Within the wiki is a library of tools called the APLTree library. Would you once more raise your hand if you've ever visited the library? Okay, that's a respectable number. In the library is a substantial list of components for writing applications. And with those, also development tools. Again, I would be surprised if many of you had used these, because again, in the applications that we work on, these address problems that have been solved long ago. So in our world, this would be something, it would be extra work for us to replace, if we ever wanted to do that, the solutions that we've already got in place, and replace them with library code. But once more, stick up your hand if you've ever used the APLTree components, and take a look around. Right. Okay, there's a few of us here who've done that, but there's limited use of these libraries because we're most of us old hands or working on old systems. None of that's surprising. These days, the APLTree library is also available on GitHub, which is now perhaps the most popular platform for sharing code. Yes, whose cooking is in the library? Well, most of the heavy lifting has been done by my colleague Kai here. And you can see here where the photographer has managed to catch the aurea, the radiance of power that comes off his brain. Our credentials for offering you this work remind me of what Mark Twain said about himself and H.G. Wells long ago. Between us, we encompass all human knowledge. Mr. Wells knows everything that can be known. And I know the rest. And you can see in this analogy, despite the hair, I have Mark Twain's role. So the Dyalog Cookbook has a very nice front cover. And we invite you to contribute to it. A good bit of it is done already, perhaps about a third. We know that you know other solutions. You've been working with them for a long time. Possibly better solutions. And we're confident that you'll offer us your advice. How would you do this? Well, the Dyalog Cookbook is visible on the Leanpub.com web service. This is a publishing service, very good for publishing technical books. And I'll come on in a moment to why that's true. The latest preview of the Dyalog Cookbook runs currently, I think, about 80 pages, is up there, and you can see the table of contents and the plan for what else should be in it. That's the web address for it, leanpub.com, the Dyalog Cookbook. I'll show the URLs again before I finish. The book is written in Markdown. Would you raise your hand if you've used Markdown to write in? Okay, yeah, thank you. This is definitely the de facto standard for documenting code on GitHub. And to our pleasure, although both Kai and I have had extensive experience of writing long documents in Microsoft Word, Markdown enables us to leave all that behind us and write in a text editor. And the Leanpub web service simply compiles the stuff into a book. It takes about 3 minutes. And I commit the latest changes up. I've been using the relatively recent text editor, Sublime Text, and to my pleasure, I find that it has syntax coloring for APL. So the code files, as well as the manuscript files, get edited in the text editor. And for those of you who are interested in the mechanics of these things, the manuscript files are in a Dropbox folder, which I share with leanpub.com, and that enables me to edit them both simultaneously from a Windows machine and from a Mac, and commit the changes and just get a new version of the book generated. Again, after long experience with programs like Microsoft Word, this is just pure pleasure. The Dyalog Cookbook has got all its source files on GitHub.com, so you can contribute. Sorry about the hands, but I really want to know this. Who has a GitHub account? Oh, right. Okay. So the workflow model that we're using for this is known as the forking model. Forking. And the way that you contribute is you fork the Dyalog Cookbook repository into your own account. That gets you a complete copy of it. You work on it in the standard Git way, and when you got changes that you'd like to submit to the cookbook, you lodge a pull request with the cookbook repository. We'll look at your changes and thank you for them, and no doubt just bring them into the book. We're about 35% the way through our table of contents. You can see at the beginning, this is the Dyalog Cookbook for Microsoft Windows. And when we saw the platform-independent tools that had appeared in version 15 of Dyalog, we thought maybe it's time to change our title and just remove for Microsoft Windows and go cross-platform. After some discussion, we think we're not ready for that yet, but it's clearly getting close. What I foresee is that we will, from time to time, print some copies of the Dyalog Cookbook and have them at events like this. But its biggest value is going to be as PDFs, as mobile books, and possibly shipped with the Dyalog product itself. And that for some time, it's going to be a moving target. It can grow and evolve with the tool set. So there's little reason to invest money in long print runs with something which is, despite Morten's declaration that the rate of innovation at Dyalog is going to slow, this will still be able to keep pace as the tools develop. So we look forward to a future in which you'll write more applications and tools, and perhaps you'll feel inspired and encouraged by the wonderful tools that are around now to get busy on packaging something that you already have working and license your competitors. Live the dream of being a programmer plutocrat. While you do so, join the British APL Association, if you're not already a member.
What year is that?
And while you're in the process of this, use Slack and the APL room team, which you can join. There's a cookbook thread there which discusses the work in progress of the cookbook as we go along. We sometimes just go to that and ask people for opinions. So you can see there the URL for the APL room on Slack, for the Dyalog Cookbook on GitHub, and the Dyalog Cookbook on Leanpub. Or if all that's too annoying, you can just write to us at our email addresses there. Any questions? Alex.
What do you think is like the biggest thing stopping you from dropping the for Microsoft Windows part?
At the moment, there's no, I'd say it was the user interface. When we first drew up the table of contents, we thought we should sketch out chapters for WPF and for HTML5 JavaScript. We gave that a little more thought and realized actually the economics of doing a user interface on Windows with native Dyalog is overwhelmingly, the case for it is pretty much overwhelming. If you've got limited, if you've got APL skills, you can write a simple user interface in native Dyalog with relatively little investment in learning new things. You can write a much better user interface in WPF or HTML, but you've got a much bigger learning curve to get there. So for the target market of I've got a simple application, I need a user interface, getting into the Dyalog UI, native UI is essential. So we can see that we probably won't do the WPF chapter, but we can see that the HTML chapter will be very important and will coordinate with, looks like my server, but Morten's news about this embedded HTML from Chrome also looks promising. We don't think that the book's ready for cross-platform until there's a simple way, comparably simple to the native Dyalog user interface to produce a UI. What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, give me some time to think about it.
You want to add anything to that?
Yes.
Good.
I'd like to show the APL Wiki, the APLTree project page. A little bit down. This
Excuse me.
This is not APLTree project. This is the front page.
Thank you.
Really. Further down. We need the first grid. Yeah, okay, that's it. These are all the tools we were talking about. And 3 months ago, that column didn't exist. That one was populated exclusively with the red ones. And there were ticks just in the Windows one. Now, 3 months later, you can see the red ones means there's no point in converting them, so they don't count. There are very little that are still waiting for a contributor or for somebody who pays for it. Pretty much everything is working under Linux and operating system. And what I mean by that is that the test cases are run in all 3 environments. It's not just that I tell you, yeah, it works. The test cases really run through. When you go a little bit further down, for the second grid, these are the utilities which are not part of the application that is finally shipped. These are the tools that help you develop them. Well, tester is something in between, really, but anyway. That is less impressive, I admit. But when you consider that, for example, Fire is about searching and replacing in a workspace, which is a pretty simple job, you would think. It's all about GUI. 99% of Fire is GUI, make your life easier. And converting that into an HTML application is a very big job. And that's why I'm not seeing that happening anytime soon. I'm gone. I'm back. But you see, we are on the right track. We are getting there.
Awesome, cool, thanks. I'm not sure if this is the right talk to discuss it, but you said you used Markdown. Can you compare that to DocBook?
The next talk is about Markdown.
Okay.
Good question. Yes, and I think we once did a whole issue of vector in DocBook XML, and I'd much rather use Markdown. If to give you a short answer. Vivica.
Well, we all know that Kai has put an extraordinary amount of work into creating the APL Wiki. I was wondering, what gave you the idea of starting the project of developing the cookbook?
2 years ago, this started in Eastbourne, when you gave a workshop on the APLTree utils.
I would rephrase that and say, I tried to do a workshop and I failed.
Yeah, okay. So there was a simple observation, or 2 observations. This material was extraordinarily valuable, and a one-day workshop was completely inadequate for covering it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was then walking along the seafront at.
And you came up with the idea. Yes.
We should do a book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like books.
Still.
Aaron.
So you talked about the innovation and the change in the way things are happening. Is a book even relevant for the future generations learning to do this kind of stuff, or should it be in a different medium?
Very good question. Yes, we would much rather present it as some kind of a series of tutorials or something like this. But the issues addressed by these tools are quite deeply entangled, and The best way we've seen of developing this is as a book with chapter at a time, handling these issues, introducing the tools. And so in that book, you see the same trivial application with these tools wrapped around them, and the packaging software that goes around them and turns it into an application is getting reworked as you introduce topic after topic. It would be fairly easy just to present the final solution and say, here is a complete framework for any application, but then there'd be no understanding transmitted, and you just have this very complex stuff, and most of it would be just baffling. And if it ever stopped working, you've got no idea what to do it. So a book with its like linear development is the only way we've seen of tackling this. If you can see any other way to do it, please talk to us.
In particular, when you consider that, for example, writing automated test cases for a GUI requires you to write the GUI from the start accordingly. If you ignore the testing aspect at the beginning and you just write your GUI and then you say, okay, now I'm going to our tests, that means pretty much you will fail, or you will rewrite your GUI from scratch. While when you take that into consideration straight from the start, the additional effort is pretty much zero. Well, you have to still write the test cases, but the design is quite easy. So you should know what you are going to do up front. That makes life much easier. But still, the question is very reasonable, and I can imagine that there could be videos explaining certain aspects of certain tools. We have 1 minute left.
There we go.
We do actually have somebody here in the audience who have developed and packaged quite snazzy looking applications developed in Dyalog APL. And I would actually like to pose a question to Siggy. Now, if you had had something like the Dyalog APL Cookbook, would it have made it easier for you, for example, to package and wrap the sexy application for the childcare company?
Yes. Ziggy said yes. Okay, thank you very much.